Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dismissed the latest ceasefire proposal by Hamas. But his office says a delegation will visit Qatar to continue negotiations on the release of Israeli captives. Now, Netanyahu has also approved the military's plan for a ground operation in Rafah, in southern Gaza, where around 1.5 million Palestinians have sought shelter. Now, Hamas has proposed its plan be implemented in 3 stages of 42 days each. In the first stage, the group demands the withdrawal of Israeli forces beyond Salah al-Din Road to enable people to return home. Hamas says it's ready to release female Israeli reservists held captive in Gaza in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, 50 inmates for each captive. Now, in the second stage, Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire to be announced before it releases any captured soldiers. And in the final stage, the group proposes the end of Israel's siege and the beginning of reconstruction efforts in Gaza. OK, for more on all of this, let's go to Hamdah, Salhut, who joins us now from occupied East Jerusalem. Netanyahu's just responded to this Hamas proposal. Can you just go into a little bit more detail about what he had to say?
Well, the Israeli Prime Minister's office releasing a statement that was quite short, saying that Hamas's demands are still unrealistic. But what we do know is that these negotiations are no longer at a stalemate. Remember that a couple of weeks ago, the negotiations in Cairo were entirely stalled, and the Israelis did not send a delegation there. But this time, it seems that the Israelis will be sending their own delegation to discuss with mediators about the potential of this deal. But again, the Israelis have said that no matter what, the war is not going to end until all of their objectives for this war and how they want to prosecute it are met. Hamas's demands remain the same. They want to see a comprehensive ceasefire, meaning an end to the war. And the Israelis say that is simply a non-negotiable.
At the same time, the War Cabinet has also discussed its plan for this Rafah offensive. What more do we know about that?
That's right. Israel's war cabinet convening about drawing up plans for Israel's invasion into Rafah. The Israeli prime minister is saying that they now do have plans for the evacuation of the nearly 1.5 million Palestinians who are seeking refuge in Gaza's southernmost city. But remember that this anticipated ground invasion into Rafah is something that has received a lot of criticism, a lot of condemnation from around the world, especially from Israel's biggest ally, the United States, who said that they simply wouldn't support an operation like this, given how many civilians were in Rafah. So the Israelis have remained persistent, saying that it is absolutely necessary in order to achieve their goal of eliminating Hamas. They say they must go into Rafah. So at this point, the Israelis are saying that they are in the initial phases of approving plans. They have approved the plans for the evacuation, but how exactly it'll work, we do not know just yet.
OK, thanks so much for those updates. That is Hamdah, Salhut for us in occupied East Jerusalem. OK, well, let's talk to Hani Mahmoud, who's joining us on the phone now from Rafah. And just in regards to this potential offensive, Israel's talking about evacuation. How realistic is that?
Well, Tom, just to start with, people were quite looking forward to hearing something constructive and positive in response to Hamas' proposal for the ceasefire or the potential ceasefire deal. And right now, the news coming from the Prime Minister's office is just creating a state of mayhem and frustration among people here in Rafah city. We're talking about an overcrowded city, already packed with displaced families, already struggling day to day to find basic supplies and food, and suffer largely from the false narrative of evacuation safe zones that were ordered. They were ordered by the Israeli military to go to avoid being bombed, but they ended up being bombed. So now they talked about where is the next safe evacuation zone is going to be, and how realistic is that going to be, and what are the corridors that people are going to be taking. We're looking at a very small, very small and overcrowded area from every part, the eastern part, the central part of the city, the western part of Rafah city already full of tents and displaced families. So in terms of of ensuring the safety and the safety of displaced individuals and families here. It's not clear how it's going to happen. All eyes are at the central area that is already under heavy bombardment, and we've seen in the past couple weeks how it intensified the attacks, the aerial attacks, as well as the ground attacks on the central area, mainly in Deir al-Balah and Nusayrat refugee camp, and as the area that's very close to Gaza shore. It just shattered every sense of safety and security for people. Something important to point out here, like this talk has been going on for quite some time now. The threats of coming to Rafah and expanded ground invasion is something that is used as a political pressure by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And right now, in response to the proposal made by Hamas, it looks more like another way to leverage on the negotiations in Cairo, as the when is going to happen is not clear yet in the statement, or the plan hasn't been approved, but the when is not clear right now.
And all the while, the humanitarian situation, both in southern Gaza, but particularly in the north, just keeps getting worse.
It is getting worse. Right now, with this statement coming out of approving the military plan and the evacuation plan, things are going to get really very bad here in terms of how people are going to cope with the situations, in terms of ensuring the flow of the humanitarian aid that are really very difficult. We're talking about not only difficult situations which people struggle daily basis to find food supplies and other basic essentials, but in terms of the flow of entry, an operation in Rafah would mean a complete blockade on Rafah crossings, which means no one should expect an entry of a single truck coming from Rafah crossing to overcrowded Rafah city to provide a humanitarian aid. There's also the ongoing constant attacks on aid seekers across Gaza City. We've seen within the past couple of days and also the past 48 hours, 3 attacks, just hours separated them, where many Palestinians go to trying to get food supplies and essentials to their families. There's also the blockade on essential medical supplies to hospitals, and there was a convoy of medical supplies that was blocked by the Israeli military. Also could have medical scissors and medical shears necessarily needed for surgery and operations. So it's likely to get really worse in each passing day right now, with this news going viral right now.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Hani Mahmoud, for us there on the phone in Rafah. Okay, well, for more on all of this, joining us now from West Jerusalem is Gershon Baskin. He's the founder of the Israel-Palestine Center for Research and Information. Thank you very much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. First of all, Netanyahu says that Hamas demands are unrealistic. In what way? What's the main sticking point here, do you think?
I think it's important to note that despite what Netanyahu said about the demands of Hamas being unrealistic, the war cabinet has decided to send a team to Doha to continue the negotiations. This has to be taken in the context of the negotiations and understanding that Israel is trying to make a stronger position going into those negotiations. It seems clear that Hamas has demonstrated some flexibility in their answers that they gave to the Qataris and the Egyptians, both in terms of the staging of the ceasefire without demanding an immediate Israeli declaration to end the war, with regard to the withdrawal from Gaza, which they are not demanding take place immediately, but can be done in stages. And there's also been some indication of a willingness for flexibility on the issue of prisoners. I think that probably for the Israelis, the most difficult point in the Hamas answers, as far as we know, is that the 700 to 1,000 prisoners to be released include at least 100 prisoners who are serving life sentences, meaning that they have murdered Israelis. And that's going to be difficult for the cabinet to accept.
Okay, you've said that there's been flexibility from Hamas. Do you think that we will see the same sort of flexibility from Israel?
Well, I think if there wasn't going to be flexibility on Israel, they wouldn't have sent a team or decided to send a team to Doha, as they didn't send a team last week to Cairo when there was a Hamas delegation there. So the fact that the team will be going to Doha is a sign that Israel is willing to negotiate. The big question behind all of this is Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Sinwar really interested in an agreement at this time. There are analysts who say that the hostages for Sinwar is his life insurance policy. For Netanyahu, the prolongation of the war is his political survival. So the bottom line is, do they really want an agreement here? And we don't have an answer for that. Certainly the people of Gaza, the people of Palestine, the people of Israel want an agreement to be reached. We want the hostages home. The Palestinians must have a ceasefire in Gaza. Everyone needs a breaking point for having to be able to think more coherently, more rationally about the situation on the ground when they're not being bombed.
Yeah.
The operation in Rafah cannot be done immediately. And I think this is also in the context of negotiations. The fact that the war cabinet and Netanyahu have approved the battle plans for Rafah doesn't necessarily mean that the battle plans will be implemented. If we do reach an agreement and there is a 45-day ceasefire, well, then it's put off, and maybe it can be put off permanently.
Okay. I mean, is it just posturing, or is Netanyahu really defying a clear call by the United States that going into Rafah would be a red line for them? Is there a Rafah operation that Washington could actually support?
I think Washington has told Israel that before they do an operation in Rafah, they have to evacuate the civilians there. With 1.5 million civilians between Khan Yunis and Rafah, this is not something that happens overnight. If Israel were to attack without removing the civilians from the Rafah area, it would be a breach, a serious breach between Israel and the United States, and I don't see it happening. I do think that there's a lot of posturing in announcing today, before sending a delegation to Doha, that the cabinet has approved war plans.
OK, we'll have to leave it there, but we really do appreciate your time and your insight into all of this. That's Gershon Baskin for us in West Jerusalem.
Thank you.